Sarah continued her work, her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands moving with a mechanical grace. They were erasing the evidence of their time together, one item at a time. Every object was handled with a surgical, painful precision that kept the silence intact. Elias reached for the last remaining items on the kitchen counter, a pair of mugs and a small wooden bowl. He placed them into the final box, his movements slowing as the surface cleared. Sarah stood by the hallway, her hands resting on the edge of a stack of books. She watched him, her expression unreadable, as he pushed the flaps of the cardboard together. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the absence of their shared routine. Elias pulled the tape dispenser across the seam. The sound was sharp, a violent, screeching rip that tore through the quiet air. He pressed the tape down with his palm, smoothing the edges until the box was sealed tight. The metallic click of the dispenser's blade followed. He stood up, his back stiff, and looked at the row of boxes lining the floor. They were uniform, stacked with a cold, geometric finality. The experiment was over. The physical evidence of their life had been reduced to these sealed brown containers. They stood in the center of the living room, the space between them now vast and unshielded by the clutter of their lives. The floorboards were bare, stripped of the rugs that had once dampened their footsteps. Elias kept his weight shifted toward the window, his eyes tracing the dust motes dancing in the fading light. Sarah remained near the center, her hands hanging loose at her sides, no longer reaching for anything. The room felt larger, colder, and entirely indifferent to their presence. Every breath they took seemed to amplify the silence, a heavy, pressurized atmosphere that pressed against their skin. They were close enough to touch, yet the distance between them felt insurmountable, a chasm carved out by the months of friction they had failed to resolve. Elias looked at the floor, noting the faint, rectangular outlines where the furniture had pressed into the wood. He shifted his gaze to Sarah, watching the way her chest rose and fell in the quiet air. The failure of their attempt to bridge 30 years of absence hung in the room. Neither moved. The weight of what they had tried to build, and the reality of why it had crumbled, anchored them to the spot in a stillness that felt final. Sarah broke the silence first. She turned, her footsteps echoing against the hardwood as she walked toward the front door. Each step sounded deliberate, a measured retreat from the space they had once shared. She reached the threshold and stopped, her hand hovering over the cold brass of the door handle. She did not push it open immediately. Instead, she pivoted, her body angled back toward the center of the room where Elias remained. The light from the hallway caught her face, revealing the lines of exhaustion and the quiet clarity of the moment. She looked at him, not with anger or regret, but with a profound, steady recognition. A small, sad smile formed on her lips, a slow curve that held the weight of every memory they had salvaged from the past. It was a gesture of gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the time they had stolen from fate, and a final, painful acceptance of the end. The smile lingered, fragile and honest. Elias watched the smile vanish, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he processed the finality of the gesture. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, rhythmic pulse that demanded action. His right hand twitched, fingers curling into a half fist, an involuntary reflex to reach out and grab her wrist, to pull her back into the room, to demand one more hour, one more day. The air in the room seemed to thin, making every breath a conscious, labored effort. He felt the weight of his own history with her pulling him forward, a magnetic force that threatened to override his better judgment. He saw her shoulders shift, the subtle preparation for her departure, and the urgency intensified. He had to stop her. He had to speak. But the words died in his throat.
If you made it this far, you already know the vibe. Hit that like button, subscribe for more, and don't miss what's coming next. New content, real stories, every week. See you in the next one.